Before that, I did my undergrad from IIT Delhi in mechanical engineering, and I've been using Python, not too much for data analysis, but I've been using Python quite a bit for web scraping and stuff like that. So would be happy to share that.
Thanks, Ankur. So everyone, I think Arushi had sent out a set of instructions for installing Spider. So a quick show of hands if you were able to install it or not.
So just quickly, right in the bottom, if you guys could see, there would be a reactions icon, and in there you can raise an emoticon or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quad. Okay, that seems good. Nice. So, is there anyone who's like facing issues installing Spider? I think almost everyone has installed it. So no one's facing any issues with Spider. Awesome. Great. Um, cool. So let's get started. Can people see the screen now? Okay, cool. Thanks, Arushi. Um, all right, everyone. So this is intended to be a workshop. It's intended to introduce students who are not from an engineering background to Python. And the only three things that you need are a working computer, any OS. Like if you have Windows, that's perfect. I think everyone's got Windows here, or Mac OS or Ubuntu. And you need to have the Spider ID installed, right? And something else you need is like the drive to learn, which I guess everyone does because they've showed up. And next up, the structure of the workshop. We'll have very few slides, and we'll focus more on doing through examples. It's like a discussion based session. It's not a class, it's more like a session. We'll have 8 sessions of 1 hour each, and this will be spread across 4 weeks. And in the 4 weeks, we'll go over Python intro, types, variables, assignments, functions, loops, dictionaries, all those things. We'll have 1 week on data analysis using NumPy and Pandas because that was popular in the survey that we sent out earlier in terms of the responses we got. And we'll do some web scraping using Selenium. And finally, to wrap it all together, we'll do like an end-to-end analysis of an actual data set scraped from a website somewhere, and we are yet to decide on what exactly that will be, but it will be something relevant to everyone. And finally, there will be weekly assignments. These are intended to help you guys to follow along what's being discussed, and sometimes they'll cover slightly more advanced topics. And again, Spider ID, please install it. If you're having any trouble, let us know. And the Piazza link will be shared after the class. This is not the right link, I guess. Arushi, do we have the Piazza link by any chance for the course?
Not yet, but I can just set
Cool.
it up while we're. Um,
Sure. And everyone, please feel free to ask questions on Piazza, create a new post so that, everyone can see and learn from your questions. And hopefully we'll try to, answer those questions in a timely manner. Prankur, would you like to add anything?
No, I think everything is fine. Great.
Cool. Yep. Yep. Nice. So, how many of, before we get started, because I haven't heard from anyone, I hope people are following along. Um, have you guys used Python in the past? Verbal answer would be appreciated because I can't hear anyone and I'm the only one on the screen. Yeah.
One thing, I've actually not allowed people to unmute themselves. So
Oh, okay. Can you please?
Yeah, I think that would be good to
yeah,
like let people
Yeah,
unmute themselves whenever they can.
please.
yeah,
Yeah.
now they can unmute themselves.
Okay. So Manav says no. Arshad also says no. Oh, okay. So no one's used Python in the past. Cool. And in terms of like which field of study or what background you guys are from, I'm I'm assuming most people are from like an economics background, or is there a mix?
Public policy. It's mostly see
Yeah,
econ
mostly
or
economics, Manav, public policy. Oh, cool. So using R will come in handy, or like you'll like there will be some paradigms from R that you can port to Python, and you'll see as we go through the course what those are. Cool. So mostly economics. Nice. All right, everyone. So let's get started. So for the first session, we've prepared some slides. Can people see this?
yeah.
Cool. And this is the way we'll do things. I'll switch between slides and Spider. And if you've installed Spider, you can do this right now. This here is called the console, right? This part of things. And if it's not visible, if the font is too small, let me know. Is the font too small?
Yeah, I think maybe you can increase that. Yeah, I
Yep,
can see it, but
yep,
it's tiny.
yep. I'll increase the font size just a sec. Okay, that will take me a while, but give me a second, guys. While I'm increasing the font, if you have any questions on Spider, okay, Manav, your font is too small. I'll fix that.
Also, just like feel free to unmute and or switch on your videos if you want, if, if there is no bandwidth issue.
Hello, Saket.
Yeah,
Azad here. Okay, so
hi,
what is
Azad.
the difference between Spider, Jupyter Notebook, and a number of things that we hear?
Nice. So the difference is that all of these are different programs which let the computer interpret Python code. Okay. So you need some sort of a program which tells the computer that what you want to do using Python, right? So you can use Jupyter to do the same things that you'll do using Spider, or vice versa. But there are some factors like the ease of use in Spider, which we have chosen Spider. Does that answer it? And
Is it
yeah.
same as using R and R Studio and Python and Spider? It's an IDE like thing. Is it same
Uh,
as?
Definitely, yeah. Spider is an ID on top of Python, and Jupyter is also an ID on top of Python. So it's like if you had, so R Studio is an ID on top of R. If you had something like an R Studio Plus, which would let you write R code, right? So that would be a different IDE, right? And although no such thing exists because R is very tightly controlled. For Python, you have different IDs which use the underlying Python program to interpret the code that you write. Cool.
Yes, that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Sorry guys, just a sec. I'm increasing the font size. While I do that, how's everyone doing in Corona? How's India? Okay, not that great, I assume. All right, I'm struggling to do this, which doesn't bode well. To change this a bit, let me try the other screen and hopefully that works better. Cool, thanks Prankur, I'll try to do that.
Saket, I think for
Yeah,
today we don't really need much of a spider, right?
hold on. For today we don't, but I would, um, let's see if we can do this. One sec. Is this better in any way or is it the same? I'm trying the other screen out, guys. Is this better in terms of the... No? Yes?
So it's people say it's manageable, so I think
Okay,
should be.
cool. All right. Sorry, everyone. I promise to fix this by the next time we do this. I'm so sorry. Cool. Coming back to it, right? So let's start with the actual thing now. So why choose Python, right? It's incredibly powerful. Me, myself, I've built a lot of things in Python. I used to work for the company I told you about, LinkedIn, right? And we've built websites on it. We've built artificial intelligence applications on it. It can do almost anything that any programming language out there can do. It's easy to read and write. Like there are just so many things that are available to you. that you can very easily start doing something, and it's super easy and it's fun because at least me personally, I've coded up games in Python. I've played around with it a lot, so it's most definitely fun to work with. And finally, it has an extensive set of libraries from use perspective, and we'll get to explore some of those libraries during this workshop, like Selenium, and we'll get to explore NumPy and Pandas, right? So I hope everyone's installed Python by now. And why did we ask you to do that? Why is that important, right? Python is a language in which we give instructions to the computer. So you might know that computers run on ones and zeros, but sort of how do we convert this language how do we give instructions to the computer in ones and zeros? By using this particular language called Python, right? It has syntax and semantics, so there's a very specific way in which you write Python code, which allows the computer to interpret things and convert it into bits and execute it, right? But how does the computer understand these instructions that, when you're asking the computer to say, open up a web page, scrape the data from that web page, how does it understand those instructions? So for that, we need an interpreter that takes those instructions and turns it into ones and zeros, right? So this is where the installing part comes in. This is why we asked you to install Python. And this interpreter, a show of hands, how many of you installed the Anaconda package? Yeah, that was in the instructions. So you know what Anaconda is by now. It's like a package manager which installs all the necessary things so that the computer can understand the Python code, right? So this is not the same as the Spider IDE, right? The Spider IDE is something that's built on top of Anaconda, which uses Anaconda to understand things. The Spider IDE is intended to help you write code better and to interface with Anaconda without you having to, go to the uh, terminal or the command prompt and type in actual commands there, right? And there are other ways to install Python. For example, I don't use Anaconda. I use something called pip for package management, right? But for the purpose of this workshop, we'll limit ourselves to using Conda. And great. So now we can start learning Python. And today we'll try to cover these three things already. I think we are kind of late on time, but we'll try to cover these three things broadly: expressions, assignments, and types, right? And before we go forward, any questions on Python, Spider, or Anaconda? I'll give it a minute. No questions? Cool. So, yeah. First of all, what are expressions? Expressions are input that Python evaluates and returns an output. It's like using a calculator, right? So this greater symbol that you see here, it is replaced by something else in your Spider IDE, right? Let me share that, guys. So what's the replacement for the greater symbol, the three greater than symbols here? Any ideas? That should give you a hint. this right here, right? This will get to the details of why that number exists and why it keeps on changing eventually. But that is essentially telling you that, you know, this is where you write your code, and whatever you write next to it, the Python interpreter will interpret it as code, right? And you need to think of it just like using a calculator for now, right? So you do this and it outputs the number 6, right? And say you do this and I press enter and it outputs the number 5, right? So that's a very basic usage of the console, the spider console, right? Next up are assignments. Assignments do not have an output. They are stored in memory. So you might not see an output for assignments. And I'll tell you why I say might not, right? This right here is an assignment, right? There's no output. But if I ask the interpreter what's X now, it will give me the output 3, right? Now, this is very similar to what happens in Excel. Uh, you have cells and you assign a value to cell number 1 in column A, which is A1, right? And you can rename it to something which is X, right? And if you've used R in the past, there are assignments in R. So you would have seen them there. A quick show of hands if you know what assignment in R means, or R Studio. Nice. Arushi knows what it is. Japneet, thank you. Nice. So this is essentially an assignment. X equals 3, Y equals 5, right? And now I can form an expression out of these two things, right? X plus Y. Any guesses, people, what this will be? Okay.
8.
Nice. 8, yep. And you can do assignments the same way you're doing them right now, right? So Z will be 8, right? And remember, I've assigned Z to be X plus Y. Now, what happens if I change X to 4, right? X was 3 previously and X plus Y was 8. So what happens if I change X to 4? Will this change the value of Z? Any guesses? What will
No,
be Z now? Yep,
it won't change.
exactly. It won't, because assignments happen in this way, that the expression on the right side of the equal to sign, it's executed once and it is assigned to Z, right? So it was executed when X was equal to 3 and it was assigned to Z. So Z will still be 8, right? That's like a thing that you need to know about assignments, that you simply cannot expect Z to change. But now if I reassign Z to be X plus Y, where X is 4, your Z will be 9 as expected. Cool. Makes sense. So far, so good. Any questions?
Saket, I have a question. Is Python case sensitive?
Yes, Python is case sensitive. The variable names that we use here, and again, before I introduce new terminology, the X thing there is a variable name that is case sensitive. So this is different from this. Cool. Thanks. Next one. So again, assignments are assigned once the variable is on the left, the expression is on the right, the equal sign is in the middle, right? And the variable is something that you give a name to. There are some limitations in terms of what you can call, what names you can use for a variable, right? And essentially we can also use these variables in expressions. Remember the calculator thing we did? Instead of using just numbers, we can do a combination of variables and numbers, right? Now, let's look at something which you cannot name a variable. This won't work, because if is something that Python reserves for itself. It says that, okay, here are a bunch of names that you cannot use. This is something that I need to interpret what you write, right? And here is an example of what won't work, but in a different way. Why is something that Python does not reserve? Oh, sorry, I had assigned Y. Let's do this. Yeah. A is not defined, right? That's because A was not assigned before being referred to in an expression, right? So we need to assign A, and only then can we use it in an expression, right? So you need to assign something before using it. And that's essentially the error we see. File std in. This is a slightly different output, guys, because the slides are made with some other interpreter, but you get the idea. Line 1, name A is not defined. So the interpreter will tell you what's wrong with the code, and you should really try and pay attention to it. It's telling you that name error, name A is not defined, right? So you should try and pay attention to what the interpreter is telling you. And most of the times you'll have enough information there to tell you what's wrong. If you can't find out what's wrong, something you can do is simply Google this thing, and there will be plenty of blogs online. Cool. Moving on. Again, you can name your variables anything. You can name them almost anything. You can't have space between variable names. It cannot be one, right? That's invalid syntax. You cannot have an operator. What's an operator? Operator, remember we discussed expressions just a while back. You cannot do this, right? The plus sign there is an operator. It's an addition operator. So you cannot have names starting with that. You cannot have punctuations. This will fail again, right? So the variables usually start with lowercase, and if useful, describe something about the value. So you could do something of this nature. Number of mangoes is 10. Why? Because it describes the number of mangoes, right? And they usually start with a lowercase alphabet. And I know you guys can't see this properly, but essentially the N here is small and the M is big. That's called the lower camel case. You don't have to look that up right now, but there's a reason why we do things in this way, which is which brings us to the next slide, which is that we have a lot of choices, right? We have a lot of choices to name things. We have a lot of choices to write up expressions, but why do we have these particular rules for names, right? Why do we want to say use something like small n number and capital M mangoes, right? That's usually based on like years of experience. And when you're dealing with, say, a project which has, uh, 100 lines, you don't have to be that careful. But when you're dealing with a project which has 9,000 or 10,000 lines of code, then you have to be very careful in terms of the code that you write, that other people can read it and just understand what's going on, right? So you'll usually try to follow the things in terms of the naming convention that we tell you, and hopefully during the period of this particular workshop you'll see that okay, that makes sense, or you'll find out that you don't need them. But either way, it's useful to follow these naming conventions. Any questions so far? I'll give it a minute. Yeah. Anything at all, like about naming conventions, expressions?
Underscores are fine,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry?
Underscores are fine in naming, right?
Yes, yes, great point. Underscores are fine. This is another naming convention, right? You can also do that. People use it. I don't like to use it simply because it adds like an extra character and to the name, but you can do it. Yeah. Any other questions, people? You can also start with an underscore. Are people like trying these things out on their own in the Spider console? Quick show of hands if you have it open and you're trying it. Cool. Rohit is. Oh, nice, nice. Thank you, guys. Cool. Moving forward. So,
Saket,
yeah.
yeah, I have
Yeah.
a question. So, in
Sure.
the in that console, when you are assigning something, for example, underscore mangoes is equal to 10. So that
Yeah.
underscore mangoes is also acting like X or Y because you have assigned it like that. So you will use it
Exactly.
like X or Y only.
Yes, it's a variable name. Yep.
Okay.
And X and Y seems like the variable names we were taught in school, right?
Yeah.
In algebra. But when we are coding stuff up, it's useful to have more words in there or more descriptive variable names. And that's why we try to use variable names which describe the quantity rather than some single alphabet variable name. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in Excel
Mhm.
sheet, for example, we have variable of population. So we will name that as population is equal to or something that like that.
Right,
Yeah. Okay.
right. It's similar to that, yes. That, uh, you in Excel sheet, you will assign that to a cell, but here you can input that in the console and it remembers it throughout the execution, right?
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So again, it remembers X as long as I've not cleaned or closed the console. Cool. So everyone, if you have your Spider IDs open, please try out what 3 by 2 gives you, right? And then try out 3/2. Don't type in the greater than symbol. Don't do that in the future as well, unless explicitly told to add that symbol. But try these two things out, and someone please tell me what's the difference.
First one is quotient. First one is division, and second is quotient. I suppose.
Yes, yes, that's right. Great. Did everyone understand that? So first one gives you 1.5, which is a division of two integers. The second one gives you 1, which is like the quotient, or in other words, words, it's like integer division, right? So it's like 2 times 1 plus 1. So it gives you the quotient, right? So we know that there's a difference between 1.5 and 1, right? They're two different things. So that is what introduces the topic of types, right? So if you do type of 3 double slash of 2, that gives you int, right? That's the quotient. And if you do type 3 by 2, that's a float, right? 1.5 is a float, 1 is an integer. So the computer internally uses different representations for both of these things, for 1 and 1.5, right? And to do that, Python says that, okay, these are two different things. So why don't we assign something called a type to each one of these values, right? And here in this case, the two types are integer and floating point number, right? And floats are simply numbers with decimals. And although that's not in the scope of this discussion, you can look up why the computer chooses to store these two things in two different ways, right? And what are those two different ways? Just look at them. Yeah.
Yeah. So is
Yeah.
it the modulo or just the integer value of the like the like division?
This is the integer value of division. So
Not the modulo. So like in our example, the modulo will also give one. So I just
oh
confused.
yes, that's a fair point. Thank you for that. So if it were modulo, this would be 1, but instead this is going to be 3, right? 10 double slash 3. So it's the quotient. Yeah, good point. Thanks. I'll make that uh, clearer in the future. Thank you. All right, guys. So that's the difference between floats and integers, right?
I didn't understand what was his doubt. Could you please repeat that?
Sure. So the doubt was that this symbol right here, 3 double slash 2, is it modulo or is it quotient, right? So the difference between those two is that modulo is like the remainder of division, right? When you divide 3 by 2, the remainder's 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I
And the quotient's also 1. So it's not clear if 3 double slash 2 is the modulo or is it the quotient, right? So, and that's why we use the example 10 double slash 3 to show that, oh, it's actually the quotient. Also, guys, if in case you're curious, this is modulo. Okay, percentage, 10 percentage 3. So that's the modulo uh, thing, the modulo operator, right? Cool. So we have floating division and we have integer division, and try this out, 3.0 double slash 2.0, and think about what the type will be, right? And why is it float? I'll not go into it too much right now. Cool. Now we've covered integers and floats. Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Manav here. So
Hi, Manav.
I for minus 10 point minus 10 when I am doing, so minus 10 by 3, it is minus 3.33. When I am using double slash, it is giving minus 4. So
Yes. So it gives minus 4 because the modulo is always positive. So you can write minus 10 as 3 times minus 4 plus 2, right?
okay.
And check this out. That's 2, right? So you'll always find that minus 10 equals the quotient times the number plus the remainder or the modulo as we are referring to it here, right? This is, you might have seen this in, I think, elementary math, right?
Yeah.
Oops, wow. Okay, I was wrong, guys. Hold on. Yep, you can't do that. You can do this. Double equals. You cannot assign a number to a number, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And that introduces the Boolean type, right? So the right hand side is 10 and the left hand side is 10, right? And you have a check. Are these two equal? Does LHS equal RHS? And the answer is a yes or no, or as we say in computer science, it's a true or a false, right? And that true or false is a Boolean, right? So here you can assign Boolean values to a variable, right? Something like is corona real, right? That's true. You can do that. That's true, right? And similarly, you can have a false statement. Something like is Modi good? It's a false statement.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Line 36, like your line 36.
Yeah.
Could you please explain the out, where the out is
Sure.
-4?
Sure. So 10 can be written as -4 times 3 plus 2, right? -10.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm so sorry, guys. It's 4 times -3. Let's write it this way. Cool. Now, the question is, sorry, one sec. Yeah, now the question is, what does the double slash mean? This is the quotient, right? Which is 4 here. And the remainder, which is the modulo, is always positive. So if you were to expect 3 times -3 plus -1, that would be invalid because the -1 cannot be a remainder. The remainder has to be a positive value. And therefore the quotient is 4 and it's not 3. Does that make sense? Or,
Yeah. Thank you.
cool. As in, you can also write -10 as -3 times 3 plus -1, but the rule is that the remainder has to be positive, right? And it has to be less than 3, right? So that's why you have 4 times -3 plus 2. Cool. Quick time check. We are running low on time, so I'll power through these things, but strings are important, so I'll not do that, sorry. So everyone understands Boolean by now, right? It's a true false thing, right? And you can do a bunch of operations with Boolean as well. You can do things like true and true. Oops. True and true. This will be true, right? Now, the next one is our strings, right? So strings are something that you've probably seen in R or in Excel. But maybe not as much in Excel, but I'm definitely sure if you've done some R, you've seen strings, right? Strings are like sequence of characters and they are surrounded by single quotes. Okay. That's a string, right? And you can see this only has 2 characters in it. and this has how many? 8 characters, including the space. So space is also in character, people. It's not empty, it's a character, right? Now you can also form expressions on string using operators, right? You can do the plus operator, which concatenates thing. So do people know what concatenation is?
Putting one after another.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do this hello space plus world, that gives you hello world, right? And that is something you'll use a lot. If you do any kind of text processing or text analysis, you'll use a lot. Cool. And I hope that explains strings. I am not sure if we should cover anything else given the time, right? And finally, list. Lists are an ordered collection of items, right? You have sets. Sets are usually unordered, not in order, and we'll not go into sets, but lists are something which maintain order, where order is important, right? So for example, we can write an ordered list of years. Years equal to square bracket 2017, 2018, and 2019. We do not talk about 2020, right? So years is a list now. Cool. And we can check the type of years. What does that give you?
Int.
No. Any other guesses? It just won't be int. Int is very int is a good answer in terms of that's the content of the list, but it's a list. Cool. The type is a list. Now we can check the type of an element of the list. That will be int, right? So list in itself forms a type, right? And within list, you have other type of elements, right? So all of these will give you list, right? And here's an interesting thing about list. You guys see the difference from line 50 here? Anyone, what's the difference? Quick.
We have a string here in the list.
Yeah, exactly. And all the types within a list need not be of the same kind, right? You can still have different kinds of types inside. It will still be a list, right? So that covers list. Now in list, again, you can do concatenation, right? You can do years plus another list which has 2021 in it, right? And you can reassign it to the variable name years, right? What will this be? Any guesses? What will
It
this
will just
print out?
add 2021 to it.
Perfect. Thank you, people. And it has just added 2021. Again, no 2020, people. Next is you can access.
Saket,
Yeah.
just quickly,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
will happen if you don't put those brackets when you're doing concatenation?
Nice. Thank you. So when we are doing this thing, right? Here it will most probably fail, but if they were all integers, something nice would have happened. But I don't know either. Let's check it out. Yeah. So it can only concatenate a list to a list, and it cannot concatenate an int to a list.
Could you please repeat what is an input for 53? 53? Like what have you done in 53?
In 53? Yeah. So that brings us to the point of index of the list, right? So there are 3 elements of the in the list: 2017, 18, and 19, right? The 0th index is the one here, right? 2017, it's the first one. So in computer science, counting always starts with 0 and not with 1, right? So this is the 0th index, this is the first index, and this is the second index, right? So what here's 0 will give you is the item that comes first in the list. It's at the 0th index. Does that make sense, Vinayakan?
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. And is it like Vinayak or Vinayakan? Which do you prefer?
Vinayakan is my name. Like that doesn't matter.
Yeah, cool. Nice. And similarly, any guesses like what will be years 3 now? Remember, I changed years to look like this. So what will be years
Spring
at
2019.
2021 would be the year.
Yep, 2021. Simply because this starts with 0, 2018 is 1, 2019 is 2, and 2021 is 3, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. So years 3 is 2021. And what happens if I do years 4? Any guesses?
Error. It will show an error, I guess.
Yep, exactly. Something tells me you've done this before, Japneet, but that's cool. Yeah. It's index out of range. Yeah. So that's the error that, you don't have 5 elements, so you cannot access index at 4, right? That is what happens. Cool. Now, we can also do something interesting, which is that we can assign values to indexes in the list. Okay. So we can do years 3 equals, and we'll 2022, right? And now what will years look like? Remember what was years 3 earlier? It was 2021. And now I'm saying let's assign 2022 to the value. Let's assign 2022 to the 4th value in the list, or the value at index 3, right? So
It would change.
Yeah, this has changed from 2021 to 2022. Cool. Does that make sense? Any questions on list and indexing? Indexes of the list? Nothing?
Does the type of the bracket matter? Like you have used square bracket here, right?
Yep. It does matter. Great point. So as a quick aside, if we were to do this will also work, as in this won't throw an error, but this is not a list. This is what is called a tuple, T-U-P-L-E, a tuple. Okay, it's not a list. You can access it similar to a list, but it's simply not the same. And we'll not go into what a tuple is and how they're used right now. But after the class, you can look up what a tuple is and try your hands. And more specifically, it would be a good exercise to see what is one thing that you can do with the list and can't do with the tuple, and vice versa, right? So the type of bracket matters. When you do the circular brackets, right, then it's a tuple. When you do the square brackets, it's a list. And don't use curly bracket usually. What does this do? That's it's a set. and we'll not go into sets really, because sets are, not that common in our usage of Python. Cool. And again, the bracket also matters when you're referencing things, right? So when you're referencing an index of the list, you always use square brackets. So that matters, right? And now you can do another cool thing, which is find range of elements, or you can get range of elements from a list, right? So here's continuing our example again. You can do 0 to 1, and this will give you just 2017, right? It starts at 0 and it goes up to right before index 1. Okay, now you can do index 1 to 2, or let's try 3 this time. It will give you 2018 and 2019, right? Remember, people, that 1 corresponds to 2018, but 3 corresponds to 2022, but it still gives me 2019, because the logic is that you go right up to before that index. Cool. You don't go to the index, you go up to before that index. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on that, on why like 1 3 gives 2018 2019 and not 2018 2019 and 2022? No questions? Cool. And what will this give me? I start at 1, index 1, but I have to go up to before index 1, so which is 0. So this will give me something called an empty list. Cool.
Is it like something similar to Kloppen bracket, like, or Kloppen, and like in mathematics we studied such brackets? Like, is there something similar there?
I don't know. Arushi, have you seen this in R? I haven't used that in R specifically. If
I
Arushi
could
is still.
be mentioning R, or the question is about open sets in real analysis, like closed and open sets. Like, am I understanding this correctly? Or
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Like, my question is from the from this set, so like from my back, like about Kloppen, like if we are using some other kind of a bracket, will it be considering the other? Like, will there be any change in this set which is called like the set of output we receive?
So what type of brackets do you mean?
Usually we use the square brackets for the end, like when it is closed, and for open we use the other one.
Okay.
No, so okay, I get it.
Circular
So no,
brackets.
it doesn't. I don't think it, like here. What matters is that it's a list, right? Like the brackets do not indicate a set. You're thinking in terms of an open range or a closed range mathematically, but this is the Python version of brackets. So as Saket was saying, circular brackets would indicate a tuple and square brackets indicates a list.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to touch up on that, mathematically 1 comma 3 in bracket indicates all values between 1 and 3, including 1 and 3. But here when we do L equals 1 comma 3, it indicates just 2 elements in the order, right? It just has 2 elements, 1 and 3, in that order, right? It doesn't indicate all the elements in between 1 and 3, including 1 and 3. It just indicates 2 integers, 1 and 3. 1 comes first, 3 comes next. That's all it means. Cool. Does it clarify the difference between the mathematical square bracket and Python list structure, list type? Okay. Cool. So
Yeah,
I would
Saket,
say, Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this line 70 you said.
Mhm.
So 1 comma 3. 1
1:3.
1:3. And
Mhm.
you said that 1 is 2018 and 3 is 2022. So before that it will pick up. So that is
Yes.
you. Okay, so that is the meaning of colon.
Yes, that you start at index 1,
Hmm.
you keep going until right before index 3.
Okay, that is the okay.
Yeah. So you keep going up to 2, right? So you have 1 and 2.
So if I type 0:3, then it will give me 2017, 18, and 19.
Exactly. Yep. Let's try that out actually. 0:3. Cool. 2017, 18, and 19.
Yes.
Right. All right. So
Could you
try.
explain line
Yep.
71? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, no, of course. Line 71. Yeah. So why is that list empty, right? You start at index 1, which
Right.
is 2018, but you have to end before index 1. And what's before index 1? 0, right? So it gives you an empty list. You have nothing in that range. 1 going to 1, you have nothing in that range, right? So therefore it's an empty list.
At least it should have given me 2018, isn't it? I'm
This
just
will give you 2018 1:2, but that's because you start at index 1 and you go up to before index 1, which is again index 1, right? But we are almost out of time. People, try this out and
Yeah.
I'll find a better way to explain the range thing by
Sure.
the next time we meet. But and you can try out like how string is also a list, and remember we did something with string above. Sorry, I'm just scrolling up if that's not clear. Remember this thing, right? Hello world. I'm calling it HW. Hello world. And now if I get the item at index 0, this will be, any ideas, any guesses?
Hello world.
No, this will just be H, the character H. Although I can see why you would think it's hello world. So the idea is by default, string is a list of characters. The first character is at index 0, the second character is at index 1, and so on, right? And say if I wanted to print just hello, I would go from 0 to 5, right? Hello. Cool. I think that covers what I had for today. Right. Right. I would still, like, I agree with you guys that range is kind of confusing and I haven't touched upon string and string being a list properly. But in interest of time, we also have a few other announcements. Um, Arushi, Prankur, any announcements, any discussions? And I think people are already leaving. So yeah, feel free to leave. We'll post everything that follows from now on Piazza. But Arushi, you had something on the next session or Piazza?
Yeah, so one thing was we wanted to decide when to hold the next session. So I think first things first, we'll have to add everyone on the Piazza group that has now been created. Um, so I can add everyone who registered to the group. So just to make sure that everyone who's here has registered and filled in the Google form. If you haven't, so please do so because that is the only a consolidated record that we're keeping of all the attendance.
Right. So for the next session, what we had planned was the homework, which doesn't seem adequate at this stage, given it requires functions, and we haven't touched upon that yet. So what we can do is we can hold another session soon this week and then give you a homework. So like this week, in a sense, would have 3 sessions instead of the regular 2, just because the first one was an introductory session and we had some tech glitches. So is if like, so people have any time constraints or any day constraints, like if anyone is working or something like that, so we can work around your schedules. Otherwise, if like any day, anytime works, then we'll just send you guys an email. Most likely it'll be the same time, because both Saket and I are still in the US, so it usually works in our mornings and your evenings. But we can just send you a follow-up email on the day on which to cover. Does that work with everyone? So it'll be like a 60-minute session. And if I should like rephrase my question, does that not work with anyone? And please feel free to speak up. Otherwise, we'll just send you an email after the session and then we can take it from there. All right, looks like it is good with everyone. So we can just decide when to hold the next session and we'll let you know. It'll be soon.
Yep.
I think just to maybe prepare everyone mentally, we're looking at Saturday most probably, right?
So the idea of Saturday was to give them enough time to do the assignment, but we haven't covered enough right now. So it most likely might be like it in a couple of days, either tomorrow or day after. That works.
Okay. Thank you.
And then depending on the progress in the next session, we can like mutually discuss how long do you guys want for the homework, and that will be the 3rd session.
Then I think we can close today's session in that case. Thank you so much, Rango and Saket. It's a lot of hard
So,
put in.
Saket, do we have time for just clarificatory question?
Yes. Let's do this. I'll make like one final announcement and people can drop off, and those who want to stay back and ask questions can do that. So guys, the list range thing, please try it out and post questions on Piazza and let us know if you have any queries there. And I'll share the slides on Piazza as well. So please go through them, try out a few things, see what different types are. Just Google stuff or use W3 schools, right? And we'll tell you when the next session is very soon. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, and we can do questions now.
Yeah. So